When I was 5 years old, I was terrified. Not of monsters under my bed or other kids. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to learn how to read. My parents were a bit confused by this. Micaiah, that's why you go to school. I didn't listen. I didn't need reassurance that I could learn. I needed certainty that I could do it and do it well. That pattern continued through school. I was afraid of multiplication tables, anxious about taking exams that I've never seen before, and scared of the advanced classes I was taking. And somehow I still ended up in engineering school with ambitious dreams and absolutely no belief I could achieve them. At the time, I didn't realize it was more than a fear of just bad grades. And I thought this would fade as I grew up. It didn't. It just took a different shape. Because as I was going to school, I discovered space. And I didn't want to just study it. I wanted to change humanity's future in it. I needed to be building the rockets that were going to take us to Mars. And then I had a bigger revelation. I didn't want to just build those rockets. I wanted to be on top of them too. So a very ambitious path presented itself to me. I was going to do aerospace engineering, join the Air Force, become a flight test engineer, and get picked up by NASA. Easy, right? Yeah. Very logical path. However, very few ever actually get to complete. But I told myself, if I do everything perfect, I can make that outcome certain. Funny thing was happening at the same time. I was terrified. This time of learning how to drive. Now, it's not that I couldn't learn how to drive. It seemed like everyone could learn how to drive, but I needed to know I could do it well. And this is something that has real consequences, right? I could hurt someone. So while I'm delaying getting behind the wheel, I have to think, how can someone be so ambitious, ready to strap themselves on a controlled explosion, yet scared to go drive down the street? Still didn't have a good answer. Then I got into the environment that I've been aiming for. I wasn't just imagining becoming an astronaut anymore. I was doing the work, and I was around the people trying to become them too. Highly driven, highly capable, like me, but suddenly it wasn't something that was distant. It was in my face. It was real. It was competitive. And it was fragile. I applied for test pilot school. And I applied again. And again. Not only was I not selected, I didn't even get an interview. And that's when the tension started to build up, because I needed a rationale. I must have messed up earlier in that path. Or maybe there was no way I would have made it through anyway. Every time I faced a challenge to something that was meaningful to me, my brain was already telling me what the outcome was. You're not ready. You'll never make it. This is proof that your dream stops here. And that's when I had to admit something pretty uncomfortable. As I said, I wasn't just afraid of failure. I was afraid of not knowing. Our brains are these prediction machines. They're always taking past experiences and current information in your environment and is trying to make new models to predict what is going to happen next. It doesn't do this to limit us, it does this to protect us. So even a negative certainty, like I will fail or I can't become an astronaut, may feel safer than just admitting that you don't know. I began to call this pattern for myself high ambition, high anxiety, or haha. Yeah, I laugh at myself a bit. But it's people who are driven to do the most extraordinary things, but whose brains are working overtime to keep them safe from the unknown. In that spirit, I still wanted to push myself. That's when I began to participate in these things called space analog missions. Space analogs are simulations that we do on the ground that's going to inform us how we will live and work in space. And you put similar conditions like limited water and power, dependence on your crew, tight quarters, and real research objectives. I absolutely love these. I was meeting researchers and operators from around the world doing work I never would have gotten exposed to. And I was beginning to think about my own problems I wanted to solve in space, not just the problem of me. I was learning more and better than I ever would in a classroom. And there it was. I was a learner. But I was there because I was capable. And even when I struggled, I found my own way to respond to new situations and unpredictable environments. That is the point. Because astronauts aren't high performer when they're selected as astronauts. They're absolutely the most impressive and qualified people you've ever seen, but they become those high performers through repetition, training, failing, and adapting. Even something as simple as one spacewalk takes hundreds of hours of practice before you even step into the spacecraft. And even then, you could face an emergency where you have to use your training, accept more risk, and deal with an unpredictable situation. That's why they're selected and what they're trained to do. Now, I don't have a solution to this ha-ha system. I've tried. I've been able to develop a better relationship to it, let's say. Here's a simple tool that I've started to use on myself. I don't know, and fill in the blank. I don't know, and I am stressed about it. I don't know, and I'll have to read through that chapter again. I don't know, and I'm going to step through that scary interview anyway. It may seem silly at first, but what you're doing is naming it, and you're getting rid of the illusion that you need to resolve uncertainty before you act. Here's another one. I had to ask myself, am I predicting failure more often than I'm predicting success? I'm an engineer, so it is part of my job to think about everything that can go wrong and plan for those worst case scenarios. But I'm not being very pragmatic and fair to myself if I only think about what could go wrong. So as I start to imagine success and put it in my model, I'll actually be ready when it knocks on the door. Finally, I want to go a bit deeper. And if anyone struggles with this, I want you to ask yourself, why is that fear of uncertainty there? And most importantly, what is it costing you? For me, I thought the possibility of failure was an indictment on me as a person. When I thought I fell off that path, it meant I couldn't be like the astronauts above me or the peers who were excelling beside me. I was the first in my family to pursue engineering or a military career. So I knew I was operating in a very risky and new space. So while my brain was trying to keep me safe, I was watching opportunities pass me by where I could have grown. Eventually, when you're fed up with it, you just have to dive into that unknown. Trust the process, trust yourself, and let that high ambition side win over. And when I began to do that, that's when the magic happened. That's how I've been on 3 space analog missions. I've gotten to operate a microgravity payload on a parabolic flight, experiencing weightlessness for the first time. I even got to be a designer for a space-themed fashion show. How did that happen? None of that was on that cutout path. So I say the cost of looking for other people's results is that you're going to miss out on the opportunities that are uniquely meant for you. Now, I'm no master of any of these techniques. I'm still balancing the high ambition, high anxiety pushes and pulls, but I know I wouldn't have gotten here if I continued to try to be pristine and perfect. I got here because I accepted I can build one brick at a time. I did learn how to drive, by the way, if you're wondering. I've driven across country, and eventually I learned that I like being behind the wheel. NASA astronaut Victor Glover, a naval test pilot, and the pilot of the Artemis II mission, was the first in his family to go to college. And he said, the biggest fear I've had to overcome is doubting myself. I used to think people who accomplished these big goals didn't have this type of self-doubt. They do. They learned something a bit earlier than I did. Because when he took that leap, there was no certainty that he'd be one of the first humans to return to the moon in over 50 years. You don't need certainty of success to act. You just need the willingness to act even without it. There's no certainty that the 5-year-old anxious girl who was afraid to learn how to read could be one of the first people to step foot on Mars. And that's not the point. The point is not knowing and reaching for the stars anyway. Thank you.